Conservative political activist Charlie Kirk
Charlie Kirk
has been shot during an event at Utah Valley University.
Charlie Kirk was a conservative and political activist. This is a story about a man who had a light side. He was a father, husband, and a son. The other side is much darker. Charlie Kirk's inner Rush Limbaugh and his political divisiveness. I uncovered everything you could possibly learn about who he was. This is a story of a Greek tragedy. It's built with irony, sorrow, and eventually the ultimate price. What happened? Who was Charlie Kirk really? And how did we end up in this oh-so unfortunate situation?
Good evening, I'm Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, together the largest conservative grassroots organizations in the country. Thanks to our work, I talk to a lot of young people.
Charlie Kirk was born in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, a wealthy suburb of Chicago at that. Charlie grew up in a position of substantial privilege. He was the son of an architect and his mother was a mental health counselor, but despite his fortune, even in high school, he was already beginning to spread his deeply conservative views. 3 things that will assuredly keep you out of poverty. 1, get a job. 2, graduate high school. 3, don't have kids before marriage. Charlie Kirk is exactly right in this post. Except for one thing, he forgot step 0, and that is to be born into the richest suburb of the city you are from. Arlington Heights, where he grew up, is an area where the median income is in the top 10% of the United States. Charlie did a good job of working hard, garnering an audience, and fostering attention, but he landed on third base. Let's not pretend that this is some rags to riches story. Charlie Kirk's last Instagram post: play certain games, win certain prizes. He was raised in a politically moderate household, but Kirk listened to Rush Limbaugh avidly, a person who was well known for owning the libs before owning the libs was even a thing. Charlie saw the appeal of Obama, but was personally a Romney supporter. He could see why Obama was seen as the cool thing to vote for.
Obama out.
But as early as high school, he was writing essays for Breitbart News, alleging that his high school textbooks had a certain liberal bias. This eventually resulted in an appearance on Fox News, even at an early age. I think education, more generally, just has a liberal bias. The more educated you become, the more progressive you seem to be. The less educated you are, the more conservative you tend to be. These are, on average, largely true. I spent time growing up in both the North and South of the United States, and it does not surprise me at all, in the slightest, that Chicago, Illinois, a place in the North, has a certain liberal framing to how they view content. Meanwhile, my middle school education while living in the South involved massively underplaying the role in which hot topics, such as slavery, played into the shaping of America today. Charlie wanted to make the Republican Party cool again, and there was nothing he saw cooler than becoming the next Rush Limbaugh. This is the moment everything changed for Charlie Kirk. He went from politically involved to founding Turning Point USA, a heavily conservative organization that advocates for far-right views at high schools, colleges, and university campuses across America. Turning Point was a turning point for Kirk. He went from a passionate hobbyist to a professional careerist. TPUSA has been described as the fastest growing organization of campus chapters in America, and it is a dominant force in campus conservatism. Clearly, based on how successful Turning Point was across America, it was clear that there was a taste for more conservative views on campus. Charlie Kirk has 8 million followers on Instagram, and his organization, Turning Point, has another 5 million. There weren't people going around challenging the status quo. Charlie Kirk was simply filling a void. Charlie at first wasn't certain what he was going to do with Turning Point. Sure, it's awesome to build an audience, but what are you going to do with it? There wasn't a clear way to monetize it and no real business model to work off of. You'll never guess who absolutely ends up adoring what Charlie Kirk was building. In early 2016, Charlie meets Don Jr., and Don Jr. mentions he could use someone like Charlie. 2016 is the height of Donald Trump's campaign, and the stakes could not be any higher. But everything changed when Don Jr. introduced Charlie to the man himself, Donald Trump. Kirk had been invited to an event by Don and would introduce him to the future president. Trump remarked and praised constantly about Kirk and his organization.
You need tremendous talent to do what he's done.
building one of the most powerful youth organizations ever created, Turning Point USA, and I want to thank you, really, Charlie, incredible job.
From that moment, Charlie's career began unfolding exponentially. Trump would go as far to say that Charlie was like a son to him. But it wasn't just Charlie's charisma that helped the organization grow so fast. It was major conservative donors. Charlie sold Turning Point as a grassroots organization, but in reality, the Koch network and other right-wing philanthropists funneled tons of money into Turning Point. TPUSA quickly built a war chest of funding, giving it a reach that most grassroots campus groups could never dream of. Looking at Turning Point's financials, there are hundreds, if not millions, of different donations from all of these different organizations. This was far from a grassroots organization. They received tens of millions of dollars from a wide array of conservative organizations. $1.49 million from Vanguard Charitable, $1.33 million from the National Christian Foundation. The list is seemingly never ending. Wealthy donor funding was not the only tactic that Charlie used to grow his organization. He also went for blatant lies, conspiracy theories, and borderline hateful rhetoric to sweep in as much attention as he possibly could. Kirk was a 2020 election denier, avidly anti-trans, and seemed to relish in picking any topic that was charging to attract attention. Charlie Kirk realized what Donald Trump did in 2016. Any news is good news. He parroted all of the talking points from Trump, and Kirk didn't really seem to hold any views of his own. And in late 2016, TPUSA launched the highly controversial Professor Watch List that still exists today. More than 24 other university faculty in Maryland appeared on Turning Point's Professor Watch List, a website the conservative activist group founded in 2016 to expose and document college professors who discriminate against conservative students and advance leftist propaganda in the classroom. The word propaganda has really lost all meaning in modern day. I guess it just means content now. But Professor Watchlist was a huge catalyst that took TPUSA and brought it onto the national stage. It made Turning Point a household name to the average American, and that sort of name ID is very, very helpful when you are building a political organization. After being placed on the list, one professor was repeatedly harassed. She received hundreds of threatening emails, stopped giving out her phone number to students, and deleted her office location from her faculty page. This pivotal moment shows exactly how Charlie Kirk used culture war tactics to build an influence and garner a following. I do admire Charlie's ability to engage with spirited debate with the other side. Charlie would go on to college campuses, a place well known for learning, growing, and uncovering truths. He would allow for an open mic format where anyone could engage in spirited debate with him and ask him questions. He encouraged young people to get involved with politics, which I believe is something we need more of in the United States. We need more people from my generation involved in politics. I mean, if you look at the age demographic of congressmen or congresswomen, everyone's in their like 50s, 60s, or 70s. We need better leaders, and we need particularly better young leaders. But I just don't like how Charlie went about it. He would package seemingly docile opinions into this bombastic, incendiary piece of content with borderline hateful speech to have his message pierce through. Let's play a game of did he actually say that? We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the mid-1960s. The statement is framed like all legal protections for civil rights were inherently wrong or that racial discrimination should have been allowed, but that's not exactly what he was saying at all. His argument is more about how certain downstream consequences or interpretations of the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. For example, affirmative action or the disaster that was DEI, rather than every single piece of the civil rights movement being a mistake. So yes, he actually say that, but it requires a lot more context. Some gun deaths worth it in order to have a Second Amendment.
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year.
I'm going to go ahead and say that I think we should repeal the Second Amendment. We have way overstayed our welcome with the Second Amendment, and we're way past the point in history where it makes sense for us to have an armed population. The idea behind the Second Amendment was that you could form a militia to overthrow the government if some dictator were to come in, right? No person today is going to be able to overthrow the US government or the US military. They would strike you with a drone out of nowhere and you'd have no idea anyone would be coming. What Charlie is really saying here is that there are certain costs associated with having certain rights. Before you start typing in the comments, I know this is rich with irony now. While regrettable, those costs are preferable to what he considers losing those rights entirely. He isn't saying that he likes those deaths, rather that they are the risks that come alongside maintaining a certain liberty. So yes, again, he did say that, but it requires more context. Empathy is a made-up New Age term.
I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term.
It is framed as if Kirk says that no one should ever feel empathy ever, but what he is really saying is that the term has been completely weaponized and lost all meaning in politics today. Empathy has been weaponized as a means of being constantly politically correct and having people tongue police you and tell you what you should and should not think. Let the buck stop here. Empathy is validating that another person is still human and can have a view that is different from your own. It's something we've just completely lost in modern discourse. He said it, but again, requires context. We'll do one more. In a debate in September 2024, when asked about abortion, even in cases of SA, a 10-year-old being pregnant by sexual assault, for example, Kirk responded,
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
Oh, okay, great. So that's insane.
He said that, and it's indefensible. Sometimes I really do wonder if Charlie Kirk actually believed these things or if he held certain stances just for the sake of blowing things up online. I certainly hope he doesn't actually believe this, but it's also possible he does. Charlie Kirk really started to break through in 2016 when he took stage at the Republican National Convention and lined himself up with Donald Trump. From there, he built Turning Point USA into a powerhouse on college campuses, leaning hard into culture war narratives. The controversies came early, like the Crystal Clanton racist text scandal in 2017, but instead of slowing him down, it seemed to fuel his brand. By 2019, he launched Turning Point Action, became chairman of Students for Trump, and was blasted into the inner circle of MAGA politics. He married Erica in 2021, launched Turning Point Faith to pull churches deeper into the political fight, and started positioning himself as more than just a campus conservative. He was becoming a spokesperson for Christian nationalism. Charlie Kirk's career peaked in 2024. Things really could not be better for him. He was loved by Donald Trump himself. By this point, Kirk wasn't just this campus guy. He was a podcaster, radio host, and mainstay on Fox News. Events were selling out, people were joining his coalition, and the highlight of Charlie Kirk's career came next, when Donald Trump himself told Charlie Kirk that he was one of a few most influential people in getting Trump reelected. There is no greater compliment you could get as a political activist than the sitting US president-elect telling you that you were one of the most important people in getting him reelected. Charlie Kirk was at the height of his career. Things were going amazing and so well for him. But just a few days ago, Charlie Kirk's rise took a dark turn. He was holding an event in Utah in his usual segment called Prove Me Wrong, a stint where he argues with liberals over hot topics. The format is intended for everyone to disagree. There's never going to be a segment of everything we agree on with Dill and John. No one would watch that. People watch things for problems and the resolution to those problems. But on a nearby roof, Tyler Robinson had ascended. While Charlie is in the midst of talking about mass shootings and gun violence, he is shot. Immediately, all hell breaks loose. Charlie is wounded and medics rush him out the back. Children and women are screaming. The gunman dashes to escape, crosses the roof, and drops down. Charlie, just a few hours later, was pronounced dead. Initially, if you've seen the video online, which I'm not going to display here because it's far too graphic, as soon as he's shot, you can tell he is not going to make it. It appeared as if the gunman had immediately hit an artery and he was losing blood fast. A few doctors mentioned even if they were on a nearby operating table with everyone ready to go, he still would not have made it. Imagine a 2-liter Coke can, tip it over, and watch the Coke rush out. That is about the rate of which he was losing blood. The only comparable instance of this is when a hockey player got his throat slit accidentally. There was so much blood, but a nearby medic was able to pinch the artery, shut it down. The hockey player survived, but Charlie did not. He was assassinated in cold blood. The internet swiftly erupted. Party leaders on the left like AOC and Gavin Newsom quickly condemned the behavior as vile, which it is. Charlie's wife and his kids were even there at the event. His events are meant to be performative. Charlie is actively trying to stoke conflict for theater. It doesn't matter if you agree with him or not, he doesn't deserve death. This is America, where you can say whatever the fuck you want and get away with it. That is a core ethos of who we are. Debate, disagree, and under no circumstances do you get violent. Anyone on the left pushing the narrative that he got what was coming to him is disgusting. And anyone on the right immediately blaming the radical left, i.e. the President of the United States.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals.
Is just equally as disgusting. You also have the right being performative. I'm crying reactions live on air, looking at you, Megyn Kelly. Sorrow of which quickly seemed to transform into outrage and a vengeful spirit. Social media is trash, man. It's pretty bizarre that the right went on blaming the radical left before he even knew who the guy was. Trump stoked the fire, as he always does. Like, I don't know really what I expected from him at this point. The online left and the online right are both calling for violence in their own ways, but I do think it's worth noting that the vast majority of shootings come from men. Men of whom are typically far more conservative. The average person on the far left is a blue-haired Karen who is probably watching cat videos somewhere. They'll be fine with like verbally assaulting you, but they're pretty far from actually committing any real violence. Even Trump's assassination attempt came from a registered Republican. Most of the political assassinations in the past 20 years have come from the far right, not from the far left. It's also very interesting to me that everyone on the left was calling for peace and how vile this was, while everyone on the far right was blaming the radical far left. Charlie Kirk's death isn't just a tragedy. It's the full circle proof of the world he helped create. He built a career out of turning every disagreement into a war, and in America, when politics becomes pure theater, it doesn't end in applause. It ends in bullets. Welcome to the outrage economy. We have built a system where attention is the currency and conflict is the product. And the more extreme you are, the more the algorithm rewards you. That feedback loop doesn't stop at a podcast mic or a debate stage. Eventually, sometimes, it splits out into the real world. The United States will have all of the UK's gun deaths of the last year in the next 6 hours. No one should have extended magazines. These are weapons of war and should be kept exclusively to war. I'm fine with starting out at simply sensible gun controls in the United States, background checks, no trade show loopholes, psychological evaluations. I'm an idiot. Do you really think I should be able to walk down to the street, go into a Cabela's, open the door, and say, hey, I want a gun, and immediately walk out that same day with the firearm? That is insane. 2 politicians in Minnesota, Trump's near miss last year, and now this. But we aren't seeing one-offs anymore. Political violence is becoming the norm in the United States. Gabby Gifford, Steve Scalise, January 6th, FBI warnings about political extremism. And every single one of these moments gets absorbed back into the same content machine, chopped up, memed, streamed, and weaponized for the next outrage cycle. The body isn't even cold before the hashtags and blame starts flying. I'm hoping we get to a point in the United States where my generation starts to view guns in the same way that we view smoking or even alcohol now. Pro-social shaming works. Social pressure works. And we need to make these things just as not okay as some of the abhorrent things that we used to have in our society. Charlie's Kirk does not have to be another statistic. This can be the moment we finally admit that the outrage economy and unlimited access to firearms in the United States is a combination that our country will not survive.